Jim is a sergeant with the Tulsa Police Department and is presenting Steve Downie for induction into the Hall of Fame.
Thank you. This is a very important day to me as a third-generation law enforcement officer, to be around people that are being inducted today, and a special thanks to the current and past members of the Tulsa Police Department that are present for this induction for Steve Downie. When Steve contacted me and told me that he was going to be inducted into this august body, he said, I want you to speak for me. And I said, what do you want me to say? He goes, just tell everybody I really appreciate all their support, and that's going to just about be it. I said, Steve, there's a little bit more to it. And he goes, well, just do whatever you feel like. Steve's a very humble person. He's a very quiet person. And sometimes it's difficult to extract information from him. In fact, I've spent a couple weeks on the phone, and I would get one piece of information from Steve, and he'd go, well, I'll talk to you later. Then he'd call a couple days later, a couple hours later, and say, well, I thought of something else. He's a very humble man, and I think you'll find out that Steve Downie is truly a hero. I told my son at a young age, when he came to me and told me about how a football star was a hero, I said, those aren't heroes. Those are people with talent. Those are people that can catch a ball. I said, movie stars aren't heroes. All you really have to do is go to work with me and look around, and I'll show you a bunch of heroes. And Steve Downie certainly fits in that category. Last summer, I was contacted by Rogers County Sheriff Scott Walton, who inquired if I'd be interested in supporting retired Tulsa Police Officer Steve Downie as a nominee for the Bill Tillman Award from the Oklahoma Law Enforcement Hall of Fame. Without hesitation or reservation, I told Sheriff Walton that it would be my distinct honor to participate in the process. I agreed quickly because I had known Steve for almost 30 years and was well aware of him as a police officer and also as just a person. Steve served the Tulsa Police Department and the community with distinction for 27 years. During that time, Steve was a patrol officer, a mounted patrol officer, a firearms instructor, a canine handler, and was a member of the Special Operations Team. Also, after the event that I'll speak of in a moment, Steve became a member of the Critical Incident Response Team, which I'll speak more of in a moment. The first time I recall working with Steve was on a park mounted patrol. I quickly learned that Steve was very intelligent, that he was quick-witted, and he had a very dry sense of humor, and that he constantly, almost to the point of annoyance, wanted to talk about police work. I observed his professionalism and the courtesy that he always bestowed upon the public that he dealt with. As a canine handler, Steve proved to, again, be a very hard worker, and he appeared quickly on scenes and did whatever he could to support patrol in any capacity that he could. Steve and his partner Rex made numerous apprehensions and many very successful tracks. While on the Special Operations Team, or in Tulsa it's the same as SWAT, I had the pleasure to serve as Steve's team leader. I came to know Steve as a dedicated member who worked tirelessly. He never complained about inclement weather, the training conditions, or the difficulty of the task at hand or the mission he was assigned. He accepted every assignment regardless of how mundane or complex with professionalism, and always worked with others to accomplish the mission at hand. I must readily admit that I am not the easiest person to work for, yet Steve never showed any disdain to my direction to, Steve, do it again until you get it right, and then we'll go home. Perhaps the defining moment in Steve's distinguished career came on the evening of July 10th, 1996. Canine Officer Steve Downie responded to an alley in downtown Tulsa where an armed robbery suspect was thought to be hiding. After he parked his car, he was briefed about the situation and was told that an officer thought he saw movement in the alley. He was also advised that officers had driven through the alley and had seen nothing, and that the search yielded negative results. Fellow Canine Officer Dick Hobson arrived on the scene with his partner Dino. After a brief conversation with Steve, Dick agreed to use Dick's dog for the search because the dog was a bit more experienced. They also decided that Steve would go in the alley with Dick and Dino. Both officers had hoped that the police helicopter would be available to find the suspect, but unfortunately the helicopter was not available and the FLIR was not going to be on scene. So with great caution, they began searching the block along alley. At the midway point of the search, a thunderous muzzle blast could be heard. Steve was knocked from his feet and he was unable to stand. He had taken the full force of a shotgun blast at relatively close range to his leg. Steve began returning fire in the direction of the muzzle flash. It was so dark he actually could not see the suspect. He heard Officer Hobson moaning, and he knew immediately that his friend and colleague Dick Hobson had been shot also. Steve kept shooting at the armed robbery suspect's position, though in great physical pain. Steve would not leave Dick's side. He kept his gun pointed in the direction where he believed the assailant was, and he continued to fire. When other officers, who also were heroes that night, were close, it was then and only then that Steve started crawling and extricating himself from the alley. In fact, I remember that Steve got to the end of the alley by himself because the other officers were busy. Once again, the suspect began firing, and Dino, Dick's dog, attacked the suspect, biting him several times. The canine then released his grip and started moving toward the cover officer, who was Jim Leach. As he approached Leach yelled no, and Dino turned back and started fighting their mutual adversary again. Other courageous officers, Jack Pike and Walt Miller, entered the alley to protect the two wounded officers. Eventually, officers were able to spot 21-year-old Stephen Williams less than 40 feet away. Williams was armed with a shotgun and a .22 caliber pistol. Williams refused to surrender. 3 officers fired, and Williams was finally stopped. At the hospital, Steve continuously kept inquiring about his friend Dick Hobson. He didn't really appear to be too concerned about his wounds, even though they were determined to be very, very serious. Eventually, at 5 a.m., Steve was told that Dick Vernon Hobson had passed away. Rogers County Sheriff Scott Walton later said, quote, "Officers Downie and Hobson had, through their actions, purchased the people's fears, so they would no longer be burdened and dreaded with that possession." He continued, "The people of Tulsa saw their police for what they were, willing protectors. They came to Steve, and they came also to see Steve Downie's true colors as a true servant and protector of the public." Though still hospitalized and against medical advice, Steve attended Dick's funeral. Following the shooting, Steve had many pain-filled days and went through a lot of physical rehabilitation. He could have retired, but his goal, even when he was told by a lot of friends and colleagues, "You've done enough, you can retire," he said, "No, I want to get back to full duty on the Tulsa Police Department." Today, Steve still carries a lot of pellets in his leg. At times, especially when the weather's bad, he limps, but he never complains. Throughout my many years of knowing Steve, I found him to be patient, selfless, courageous, kind, and very humble. Steve's public service should serve as an example to other law enforcement officers and those that are desirous of becoming a law enforcement officer. While teaching recruit officers after the shooting, I called on Steve to speak with the recruits in training about the events of July 10th, 1996. He always recalled the events of that fateful night with moist eyes and in a very soft-spoken voice. Each and every time he recalled the courage of the other officers who entered the alley, always downplaying his own role in staying there. He emphasized how important training was, and he told the new officers to never quit, to never give up, and never stop because of the pain, as it was no indicator of your injury. His message was always inspirational and very heartfelt. Even after retirement, Steve continues to visit with recruits about survival and mindset and participates in situational scenario training. He volunteers his time to new officers because he cares. On several occasions, it was brought to my attention that an officer was having difficulty dealing with a post-critical incident. And these were officers not only on my department, but sometimes other departments as well. When I asked Steve to contact the officers and inquire if he could help them, he's never turned me down, and he's always helped any officer that needed assistance. Steve has been there, had survived, and he had recovered from a horrible ordeal so that other officers could learn of what occurred and how to get through it. In fact, Steve became a member of the Critical Incident Response Team, a peer group that supports other officers after the shooting. During his career, Steve was the recipient of many awards and honors. Some of those were honorable mention from the International Association of Chiefs of Police and Parade Magazine for Officer of the Year 1999. Honorable mention for Top Cop for National Association of Police Organizations for 2000. The National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial named him Officer of the Month for December of 2000, meaning that Steve was one of 12 finalists for National Officer of the Year. He's a recipient of the Tulsa Police Chiefs Award, the Oklahoma Buckle Down Award, the American Red Cross Everyday Hero Award. He was inducted into the American Police Hall of Fame Legion of Honor. The Tulsa Committee of 100 named Steve Co-Officer of the Year in 1999. He also is one of the few recipients of the Tulsa Police Medal of Honor and the Tulsa Police Purple Heart Award. He also is the Oklahoma Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association Medal of Valor winner in conjunction with the Purple Heart, and I decided to stop there to keep this as succinct as possible. Today, Lieutenant Governor Lamb will present him with yet another well-deserved accolade, one that Steve is most deserving of. Being a law enforcement officer was not what Steve did for a living. Being a police officer was what Steve lived for. Steve has served the community in other ways. He's participated in Meals on Wheels program, as well as the homebound ministry through his church. After retiring, Steve continued his service with the United Nations peacekeeping forces in Kosovo. There he participated in close protection details, and he trained new members of the peacekeeping mission. I should note that there is one other award that Steve got, and that was the United Nations Medal for Peacekeeping. Today, Steve serves as a Special Deputy United States Marshal at the Tulsa Federal Courthouse. In keeping with the great Oklahoma traditions, Steve is also an accomplished team roper and bareback rider. He's collected a number of buckles in that rodeo pursuit too. Why he wants to do rodeo, I have no idea. Officer Steve Downie, through the course of his brilliant and benchmark-setting career, upheld the highest standards of the law enforcement profession, and because of his steadfast dedication, unwavering adherence to the finest traditions, he is very deserving of any award. Not only did Steve Downie serve honorably, he served valiantly. It is with great admiration that I present to you retired Tulsa Police Officer Steve Downie as a recipient of the William Tillman Award. Steve Downie deserves to be inducted into this Hall of Fame. And Steve, congratulations, and ladies and gentlemen, Steve Downie, in my opinion, is a true hero. Thank you.